Hey folks, welcome or welcome back. If you're new here, I'm in the process of trying to figure out how to put together a brief, flashy YouTube style animation at the beginning of the videos to explain what's going on here, but that doesn't exist yet. So if you want to know exactly what this channel's about, you want to head back to the episode titled Introduction and the following one, Week 1, which will tell you everything you need to know about what goes on in here. If you're a regular or you know what's going on already, we've got another great interview lined up for you later on the episode this week. Mark James is here and he's going to talk to us about designing a stage cabaret act. He's got interesting thoughts on the structure, what should be in it, the layout of your act, the different textures, the different feels and paces that you require during a show to make it a really good, strong, quality show. And I think it's a really interesting interview. He's got a lot of interesting stuff to say. You should definitely stick around and check it out. For those of you watching every video as we go, you'll know that this week is supposed to be my first book club analysis review type video. I was going to break down my thoughts on Maximum Entertainment and get some thoughts from other people that are reading it along with me. We're going to review it, analyse it, talk about it. I've decided Mark's interview is really quite a long one. And also there's a couple of people in the Facebook group that have been asking for a little bit more time. They've just got hold of the book. So I'm going to push that back 1 week. The Maximum Entertainment analysis and review will be next week. But I also put a poll in the Facebook group to decide on what the next book would be. So next week will be Maximum Entertainment. 2 weeks on from then, the poll results are in. It's going to be Designing Miracles by Darwin Ortiz. This is one of the longer books in the poll. I think they did that to me on purpose, but they did not know that I have it on audiobook, so it'll be a lot easier for me to get through that one. So next week, Maximum Entertainment. If you got a copy or want to get a copy of Designing Miracles to join in with that one, feel free to do so. Read along with me. You can even join the Facebook group and join in the conversation if you wish to. The Magicians Level Up Facebook group. It's the channel here, which you need to subscribe to if you're watching the videos, is Magician Levels Up. And for the Facebook group, where we motivate everybody else as well as just me, it's Magicians Level Up. And if you want a friendly magic community, head over there and sign up to that. Have a chat about your goals, your plans, get help from everyone else in there and join in the discussion on designing miracles. Last week was the 4th week of the 12-year goal process, and it was the first week where I had a bit of a struggle. I have to admit some goals haven't been met this week, and there was one night in particular where I had 3 gigs, and this small evil voice in the back of my head managed to sneak past my defences and convince me to stop at the services and have a very large McDonald's meal. I have to get back on track next week as fast as possible, so I'm going to double down this week. Exercise in the gym and on the VR every day, force myself right back on the path, because that's the benefit of the 12-week year. 4 weeks in already, I've only got 8 weeks left to achieve the goals on this list. There's no time to sit around and put it off. I've got to get straight back onto it. When I failed in the past at McDonald's, I would spend a week feeling sorry for myself and never get back on track. But the fact that we're doing this and that you guys are watching means I actually have to get back on track straight away. One of the ways I'm going to do that is to introduce a small extra step to the goals system. If you've been watching the channel, you know I have a 3-year goals statement, a description of how I want my year to be in 3 years, which I refer to weekly to remind myself what I'm doing this for. I have a 1-year goals list, which is all the specific goals I want to achieve in 1 year. I don't look at that list again for 12 weeks because I take a 12-week chunk of those goals, put them together into a 12-week goals list called the 12-week year, and we just deal in those 12 weeks at a time. So I have a week to prepare, because 12 times 4 is 48. We have a week spare for each one of the sets, a week to prepare, 12 weeks, a set of goals that needs to be accomplished in those 12 weeks. So we have 3-year plan, 1-year plan, the 12-week goals, and the one step I'm adding now of my own, not from one of the books, is a video. A series of videos. I'm not entirely sure what to call these yet. I've gone with Hauser videos based on the character that Arnold Schwarzenegger plays in Total Recall when he's having a discussion with himself on video. It doesn't really work as a title because in that case it's evil Arnie talking to good Arnie, not the other way around. But the concept basically is that I'm going to put together a series of videos on my phone just for me. When I'm in top prime 12-week goals, go mode, I'm going to film these videos. One will be to the McDonald's eating, giving up on the diet me, reminding myself how much better I feel when I don't, and how easy it is to avoid. One will be to the negative me waking up in the morning saying, oh, I don't know why I'm doing all this, it's stupid. And there'll be a sort of a general one for all purposes, just generally telling myself to get a grip on myself. I think these will be a really useful extra feature. Those of you, and there are actually a surprising number of you out there following along my system exactly, get yourselves one of those done. Mine's quite direct, quite insulting to myself. You don't have to be quite as blunt as I'm going to be, but get yourself a video. Remind yourself at your lowest why you're doing this while you're at your highest. So that's the next step, a new step in my process. In the Craig Petty interview video, I asked you to place in the comments things about the channel that you'd like to see, things that you'd like to change, things you'd like to see more of, see less of. By no means is the current state of the videos the way they will always be. I'll be deciding on different segments, temporary segments, permanent ones, changing it around, getting the structure going better and better as we develop the channel. For right now though, I went through those comment list and all the other comments list, wrote a few notes about what you said, and we'll just discuss those briefly. Discord group. I hate Discord. Discord is early 1990s internet to me. It reminds me of going to the internet cafe at lunchtime around the corner from my drama school and messing around with BBS boards and IRC chat. It's ugly, it's clunky, it's awkward, but if you want it, you can have it. Right now it's the Facebook group that's where it's at, but if Discord is more popular, I will do Discord. Let me know. Couple of requests for videos on my prop organisation. This is probably from people that know a little bit about me and know that I have insane Dropbox lists of what I know and what I own, things on wall charts, everything perfectly organised in the drawers, videos of myself teaching myself every trick I've ever known, cross-referencing the original source videos. I genuinely focused all of my early life OCD just into one thing, magic. So if you want to see that, I will do that as well. A lot of you wanted the info cards that I put on the screen detailing how I've done this week and the various weekly goals and how that's affected the 12-week goals overall to be on screen for a bit longer. I will do that. I'm going to extend the time that they're on screen, give you more time to read it. Also in the future, I hope to make it more of a show, don't tell thing. If I've got time to actually vlog the footage and show you what I'm doing, I'll do it that way. When I don't have that time, we'll put those cards up so you can see exactly how far we've done in a week. Dr. Alex Foden in particular really wants that footage to involve me suffering and failing and sweating. I think it's a strange kink that he's developed, but I'll see if I can help him out. We'll add some sweating videos and fails on VR and disastrous practice sessions just for his personal viewing pleasure. There was a video request for information on my EDC and the contents of my close-up case. That's not really the general theme of this channel. This channel is all about goals and leveling up and getting better, but it's fun, it's interesting. So I will be doing bonus videos. Every Monday is all about leveling up. It's an interview that helps you out, helps me out, and information on the goals, focused video. During the rest of the week, and no particular schedule, whenever I feel like it, there'll be bonus videos popping up, and those will be the fun things that other YouTubers like to do, like the EDC video and the close-up case, that I'm quite excited to do myself as well, but don't really fit with the theme of the main video. One interesting point that was brought up is that somebody would like to see a contrast between my magic level now and where it is after the practice, because obviously you don't all know me, so you don't know where I am as a magician to begin with. If you watch Craig Petty's channel, you are told that I am the greatest living close-up magician on the face of the earth. This may be a slight exaggeration. I don't know why I have this slight exaggeration on his channel. Maybe it's drugs, I don't know. But it's not true. I would describe myself as reasonably above average skill-wise, and I don't feel that's particularly big-headed because I'm considering the average skill level, and it's not that very high. I have skills. I will try and find a way to demonstrate it on video. When I say I want to get better, I just want to push the plateau higher than where it is now. I think when Craig says that, I think what he's referring to is my comfort performing. Regardless of my skill level, when you put me in front of a table at a restaurant or a wedding or any event really, or on a cabaret stage or on an illusion stage with him, I am comfortable with every type of magic. It's my happy place really. When I'm performing, I am the confident person that I want to be all the time. I think that's what Craig is genuinely referring to on his channel. As a performer of magic, I just hit that table and walk away, and every table is happy when I'm there, I hope. Final comment I'm going to cover here is someone said, please no cards or mentalism, maybe some kid stuff. Wrong channel. I will cover some kid stuff probably. I will also cover cards, mentalism, coins. I am the least focused magician on the face of the earth. I love it all. I want to do it all. From balloon animals to hypnosis, mentalism to cards. Everything's going to get covered on this channel. Hi folks, welcome back to the interview section. Once again this week we have another big name for you that needs very little introduction, but I suppose
it's a bad start.
Anyway.
A big name. It's only
well, you know,
4-letter first name, 5-letter second, 6-letter second name.
Oh God, he's being funny already.
J-A-M-E-S, 4 and 5, 9 letters altogether. Sorry, go on, continue.
Thanks for that, Mark. So Mark James, as you can see, is here with me today. These days he's known as an internationally successful cabaret act, working at the Magic Castle, working in House of Cards in Nashville.
Yep.
Places like that.
That's where I got this mug.
Oh, that's a exceptionally yellow mug you have there, Mark.
Technically, I got it from Third Man Records, but it's also in Nashville, so same thing. And I'm wearing a Magic Castle hoodie. Nice.
I wonder what the hoodie was. Mine's much more unique. It's a one-off.
It is at the minute. I want one.
You're welcome to one. I'll get you one done up. The other two things you need to know about Mark that are not quite as well known as his cabaret act is that Mark is probably, I think probably the magician that I've known the longest. Right back when I was starting out, you were working behind the counter at JB Magic, and I would come in on my tired days off, not really at my top form, and you would psychologically abuse me with pickpocketing and putting in on me over and over again until I slipped it into a nervous breakdown.
I think I've probably known you as long as I've known anyone else in Magic too, actually, because there's only a few people from back then in JB that I still know, and you're one of about 10 of them. So yeah, I've probably known you as long as within Magic, anyone else I know.
Excellent. From there, you got to hang around with Mark, my God, Mason, brain completely blank there, Paul Roberts. You had Wayne Dobson on the phone with you. I also started out around that sort of time. I did a bit, then my nan fell down the stairs. I looked after her for 10 years and got really fat and bald. And so this channel is my attempt to fix that. I don't know whether you've had any chance to look at the channel. I very much doubt it. You're a busy man. The idea here with this
channel, haven't watched any of the videos, but I don't think it's going to make your hair grow back.
I'm all right with that one. I'm fine with that. I think I have a head that just about suits it. But the idea of the channel is I'm set a year and a whole list of goals, mostly in 3 categories. Magic business, magic skills, and physical stuff. And I'm going to try and solve all of these goals in a year, while at the same time doing all of my gigs and filming these videos and editing these videos. and also editing videos for Craig Petty products. Basically, this was a really stupid idea, but I've gone with it, so we're going to do it
I think
now.
it's better. I think a full plate in sort of timetable terms is better because you're more conscious of getting things finished when you wedge new jobs in between the ones you've already got. It stops you from just procrastinating. You've no choice but to get on with it. I think the more things you give yourself to do, the more likely you are to finish them. And also, I think if you give yourself, people sometimes have 2 or 3 goals and they're always the same. I want to earn more money. I want to lose weight. I want to do this thing. There are always 2 or 3 things. But if you give yourself 10 goals, or rather than having goals, you have 10 mini things. This works in shows as well. 10 mini things that you need to achieve every day in order to achieve those goals. It's much easier to finish 10 than it is 3, because if you've got 3 things to do, maybe it's go for a run, write in your diary, send some emails. If you only do 2 of those things, you've failed 33% of your day. But if you have drink coffee, drink 2 liters of water, small, make the bed, things that are smaller and easier to accomplish. If you do 8 out of 10 of those things, there's no way you're failing on the last 2 because you're so close to, you feel like I've done 80%. There's only 20% left. I think by giving yourself more things to do, you minimize the size of some of the bigger things in your head, and you make yourself more likely to achieve them. I think a full diary is better. When I've got more time and I put fewer things on my to-do list, I also get a smaller percentage of those things done.
I absolutely agree with you, and I think also a little bonus I've thrown in to make myself do it is having currently about 611 people watching also helps you get them done. Otherwise I'm going to look stupid.
Yeah.
And you're kind of, the other thing I was going to say about you is you're kind of an inspiration for that, in that your Hey Friends podcast that you started in COVID, telling us about your daily life, sometimes a little too detailed when you were doing one episode in the shower while brushing your teeth. It's kind of gave me the idea for this, but I didn't have the sense to do it in a podcast. I thought I'd make videos just to make my life that little bit extra hard.
Well, our podcast is funny for a few reasons because, as you know, in COVID, I started a podcast and I did it every single day, 5 minutes every single day for a whole year. And then after a year, I started doing it a couple of times a week or once a week, and it started being an hour a week. And then in the second year, it started being an hour most weeks. And now that it's, coming up to 5 years, it's an hour every 20 days on average. Sometimes it's longer, sometimes it's less, sometimes I'm
You're
really
late,
good.
by the way.
Yeah, I'm late. Sometimes I'm really good at it. But also, as you know, and the reason I don't advertise it anymore, so, if you listen to this, don't go and search it, is that it's so personal now. And I talk to the people who listen like I would talk to people I've known for 10 years, like it's really deep. It's really personal. I talk about my struggles in business, in health, with my family, stuff that my family have been through. I really think that when my son is older, it'll be the best thing ever that either he'll really get to know me and that'll be great, or he'll really get to know me and think, oh my God. But there are things in our lives that our son doesn't know about, like my wife's health. My wife is fine now, but she was very, very ill. And my son has absolutely no idea about that stuff. And one day when he listens to the podcast, whether that comes before we tell him or not, he'll find out how difficult that was for us and that we, never told him, because a kid doesn't need to go through that. But then also loads of stuff to do with business and the times I was worried and times things were going well and times things weren't going well. It's kind of interesting. So I kind of people message me all the time when I post on Instagram saying new podcast up, and they say, well, what's it called? And I never reply. I just leave it as it is because I kind of don't want anybody new to listen. Enough people listen to it already. And here's a weird thing. So let's not plug that, which we've just obviously done. It's not called Hey Friends. Okay, let's move on.
Okay. We'll leave that one out of the links at the bottom later on. I will ask, recently you put up your full Magic Castle cabaret show on YouTube.
And Magic and Chicago Magic Lounge too. I put up a 40-minute show.
If that's all right,
and
you put links down below for those?
Yeah, do it. Absolutely.
Go for it. A large portion of what we're going to be talking about today, and I think people should get the opportunity to see the show.
Okay, great. Yeah, please do. I'm going to start putting way more stuff out. My friend Taylor Hughes really inspired me one day by saying, you've got all this video, like, who is it for? And I said, well, for people to see it. And he said, but nobody does see it. You never share anything. So I just started putting whole shows out. I'm actually thrilled because I put the Chicago Magic Lounge show out like 2 weeks ago, 2.5 weeks ago. And it's had 30,000 views, which completely blew my mind. I never saw that coming at all. And already it's made a few things happen that wouldn't have happened otherwise. I've been offered a few crazy gigs in different places, and that's been amazing. And then, so I put out my Magic Castle show as well, which is 25 minutes. It's only supposed to be 20, but you know, I tend to overrun. So yeah, that's out on there as well. And I'm going to put everything out in the next few months. I'm going to put everything out.
Excellent. Well, I've just done a check and my 611 weren't part of the 30,000. So, you know, I'll add those numbers on later. So as you said, you haven't really seen the channel because you're a busy man. So just to explain again, like, we've done the goals. And when I interview a person like yourself, this is not one of the standard interview formats where I start from your first Magic kit that you got when you were 8, because it's always the same answer anyway. We don't care about any of that. We're here because you have a specific topic that you are a relative expert on, and I've got that is connected to my goals, and I've reached out to you to give us some information. Today, we have one of the most established cabaret acts, comedy. What would you call your act?
Guys.
Bollocks. I've actually watched it all the way through, which is
Overrated.
Extreme rarity these days, I'll be honest. Mark's one of the funniest acts I've ever seen. Very quick story before we start. The balls of Mark James. I remember I was at JB and I went with you to a show that you were doing afterwards, and you had an idea on the spot for a gag. I think you were comparing.
I know what you're going to say. Chorley Little Theatre, the gorilla.
Yeah, you had a random idea to reenact the advert. What was it? Energizer advert?
No, it was Cadbury's, wasn't it? It used to be on in the ad breaks of all of the Coronation Street shows where the gorilla. Should I jump in and tell it?
Go for it.
There used to be this advert, which if you're British, you'll have seen this ad. No, there's no question of it. But if you're not, you may not have done. Cadbury's used to have this ad, and essentially what would happen is this gorilla would play the drums, and it would be to "In the Air Tonight," you know, the Phil Collins song. But what you don't realize when you see the advert is that in that actual song, the drumming doesn't actually start until like 3.5 minutes into the song. So you think when you see it on the advert that the drums are straight in, but they're not. It's almost entirely a cappella with just some synth, and then all of a sudden at the end the drums kick in. And I thought, wouldn't it be funny if during this show that I'm the MC, the compere for, I would, you notice I always talk in this dual American English lingo thing. I thought, wouldn't it be funny if, as the compere, I walked out and I sat at the drums with a gorilla outfit on, and the song started to play, and everybody knew what was going to happen. But then the drums didn't play, and then I would continually get annoyed that the drums didn't kick in for me to mime along to. And then by the time the drums actually started, I, as the gorilla, have fallen asleep, and the drums wake me up, and I pull off the head and say, is it all right if we start again? And I thought that would be very funny. So I immediately, in front of you in the shop where I was working at JB Magic, but doing the show afterwards, called up a costume store and said, do you have a gorilla outfit I can rent for the night? And they said, yeah. And I went and picked it up and I did the bit that night, and it was funny.
And you were fine with it. I was sat in the audience. I was suffering for you because I was sitting there and thinking, this relies on one moment of gag, 3 minute in, everyone sitting and watching, everyone knowing the advert, everyone getting the joke. I was sweating for you.
Well, it was kind of funny, wasn't it? And then it wasn't funny. And then it was funny again. Then it wasn't funny. And then it was really funny. And I'd seen this comic that used to, I think he still does, used to host at a place in Blackpool called The Talk of the Coast. And it was on the front, and it's a cabaret show bar with a hotel built above it. Or rather, it's a hotel with a cabaret show bar built underneath it. I think that's the way around they do things. And there was this comedian, compere, called Buddy Lee. And me and Paul Roberts used to go there all the time after JB Magic closed. After it closed at 5 p.m. rather than after it closed for good. And we would go there a couple of nights a week, and we would watch this compere, Buddy Lee. And I once saw him sing Lady is a Tramp with a live band, but he only sang the opening line. So it was like, she gets too hungry for dinner at 8. She gets too hungry for dinner at 8. And that's the over and she gets too hungry for dinner at 8. And even in the bridge, she gets too hungry for dinner at 8. Anyway, I'd seen him do that bit, and it was, again, funny, not funny, funny, not funny, really funny. And then at the end, he would say, It's a great song that. I only know the one line, but it's a brilliant tune. And it used to bring the house down. And I think maybe that bit was in my head when I had the belief that the gorilla thing would pay off. So you know, we're all kind of a greatest hits. We're all the greatest hits of every conversation we've ever had. And I suppose our acts, in some ways, if you curate the right things, are a greatest hits of every act you've ever seen, as long as you don't rip them off directly. But you know, I certainly got the belief that a bit like that would work from watching him do a bit that was kind of like that but different.
Cool. So that's the actual reason I called you on. You are a known cabaret act, and your act. I have a cabaret act that I'm redesigning for the channel. I actually like it. It's fine as it is. It's just that it's designed. I call it my combat cabaret. It's pretty much designed for lowest common denominator audiences. I want to just keep going, funny, 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 no pauses, keep their attention, stop them wandering off. There's no real artistic value to it at all. It's just go, 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 keep their attention. And I want to sort of change that a bit, make it a bit more unique, a bit more me. Add a bit of
Jeff Hobson used to advocate for a thing a bit like that I think he called the commando act, which was the sort of act you could set up and do pretty much anywhere, you know, out of a bag. And there's certainly something to be said for that. And actually, Jeff Hobson's book, if you want book recommendations, Show Doctor is a fantastically good book about how to fix problems in your act. But I know that he's advocated. Did I say Jeff Hobson? I mean, Jeff McBride, sorry. Jeff McBride, Show Doctor. And he advocated for a commando act, which kind of sounds like what you're saying, except what you want it to be is artistic, right? That's what you're aiming for.
Something good. Yeah, this act will stay in the bag for when you turn up at some place where you're going to get last if you try and do anything of any value. But I want my own named act with thought put into the narrative and the plot line. And I contacted you because I know about your act, and also at the time because I'd just listened to Scott Wells' Magic Word podcast, and you'd gone through a really carefully planned out 7-step system for you designing a cabaret show.
Okay,
I spoke to you about that, and you went, what did you say again?
Well, it's funny actually, because the 7-step system thing, I do remember talking to Scott about that. And I was certainly in a period of time when I was really focusing. I was honing that as an idea, and I just lectured on it at I think it must have been Magi Fest in Ohio. If I was interviewed by Scott, it must have been, because that's where I did it. So I know that I just lectured on that idea and it was fresh in my head. I still believe in that system, but it's a bit more instinctive now because I don't look at the system as much as I look at my previous show, and I try to pattern match what was in the previous show with new material, but that fits the format. So if you ask me to read the list out now, I probably struggle, but I do know it. I do know what the tricks in my show are now, and I know that they still match pattern-wise what they used to be then.
Yeah, talking to you just before the camera rolled, it seems like you've basically internalized your own system now. You don't really need to think about it so much. So I thought, for the sake of a little bit of structure, I got a screenshot up of what you said your structure was, and you said that it pretty much matches what you're doing now. So I thought we'd go through it step by step and see how what you said then matches up with what you're doing now, and you can fill in the gaps and give us some advice, basically. How's that sound?
Okay. Yeah, let's do it. That sounds brilliant. Excited.
So, back when you had it all written down, step 1 was the attention getter.
Yeah, obviously the first thing you need to do when you walk on stage is grab attention. And actually, I've stretched that now to before the show. So the attention getter for me starts before the show and it continues into having walked on stage. So now I open my shows. I realize that so much of the success of the show is down to the environment that the show happens in. And of course, there are limited things that you get to decide about the environment. You don't get to decide the shape of the room. You don't get to decide the height of the stage. You don't get to decide, a lot of things. I mean, of course, the better places you work, the lower those considerations become a problem. Because, when I'm working, if I get booked for a private show, which is rare for me, but, say at Christmas, in between Christmas and New Year, I did a private show. Someone had seen me on their holiday. and they wanted me to recreate that show for them for an event they were putting on. It was, I think it might have even been New Year's Eve, but it was at like 2 o'clock in the afternoon. It was in Liverpool and it was in some village hall. And I turned up, and essentially the room was a disaster. The stage was awful. The PA system was abysmal. There were no video screens. The front row of the audience was about 40 feet away and on a weird inward diagonal. And that meant that they wanted all the kids to sit down at the front and all the adults to basically sit at the back. And what they really wanted was a children's entertainer. And the woman had seen me on holiday and must have known that that's clearly not what I am. But what she'd done, which is not necessarily her fault, is she'd seen a thing that presumably she enjoyed, but then tried to bring it into another environment so she could show it off to other people, which is kind of what we do. But there was no way in which that environment could support the show that she'd seen in another place where there was an amazing PA and the audience were 10 feet from the front of the stage, and there were giant video screens and an LED wall and a fantastic PA system and all of the stuff that helps for a show to elevate from, you know, busking, which is essentially the simplest form of being able to perform, just standing in front of people and doing it, and a theater show, which is, of course, you know, presumably the highest, those two things. And, you know, my show is usually somewhere nearer to here, but the environment that I was in was lower down here. But there are still things that you can control. There are still things you can do that will ensure or maybe wrestle back some of that potential success. So now I find that taking control of the room as early as I can is important. And that usually just means the music that is chosen. I don't choose something that people are going to be able to dance to because I don't want people to dance. I don't pick something that appeals to kids because I don't want kids to love it and run around on the dance floor. I choose pre-recorded introductions, and I specifically get my friend Taylor, who's American, to do those pre-recorded introductions for me because I recognize that to an English audience, there is still a kudos in entertainment to an American voice, because of course we watch American movies and, you know, American TV shows, and we're just familiar that something about Americanism injects a kind of perceived quality into entertainment, I think. So when they hear an American voice say, tonight's performance will begin in, you know, I think it feels special in some way. So I have a 10-minute countdown that says tonight's, the next performance of, and then the name of my show. So at the moment, it's the next performance of Wonders will begin in 10 minutes time. Feels old-fashioned, it feels theatrical, it feels different, and then the music starts. And typically, I choose things like either Postmodern Jukebox or Ben Rector or Cody Fry, people who have like a sort of a Disney-esque orchestral quality to their music, but that's also poppy. So it's kind of it's accessible and it feels familiar, but it also feels high level as well. I want it to feel produced, and I want it to feel like what they're getting is something that feels of a high standard. So those songs are playing for 10 minutes with constant introductions that say, don't forget to grab drinks and snacks so you don't miss a second of the magic. And before the show, you can check out Mark on Instagram by searching blah, blah, blah. There's all these little things. And then finally the show begins, and the minute-long introduction with some very specific music that I use, and then it introduces me on stage. And I think it grabs the audience's attention in a different way by showing them that what they're about to see is hopefully different to everything that's happened already, and presumably, at least, well, the production here has been good, so what is next? And then I walk on stage and I do my in real life, you know, attention getter. But also I have video screens for cruise ships, holiday parks, places like that, and they have typically quotes about magic coming on the screen, so there's something to watch and little interesting things that are happening before I walk out. And then I walk out on the stage, and in the days that you're talking about with Scott Wells, I was opening with fire eating, but now I've moved fire eating to a different part of my show because it's part of a completely different routine for two different reasons, which I guess we'll get to later. But I still open my show with fire because there's almost nothing better than that for grabbing an audience's attention than walking out with a flame. So now I walk out with a torch to cane, and I light some flash paper that's got sparkle additive in, and I throw it at the audience, and it explodes right in front of them and creates a flash. And then I make the torch to cane appear, and I spin it between my fingers, and I like to grab the audience's attention with kind of vulnerability and honesty as well as a person. So my opening lines are, Hi, friends. My name's Mark James. I love magic. If you like magic too, let me hear you say, oh, yeah. They shout, oh, yeah. I make the cane appear and I say, well, let's do some. And straight away, I think they think, okay, it seems a bit dorky to walk out and say, hi, I love magic, but then do something brilliant that catches them off guard. And then I'm into the show. So definitely the attention getter is important. But one thing I've learned, I think, since doing that interview with Scott and lecturing at Magi Fest is that the attention getter starts as early as it is humanly possible to start it. So if that's 10, 15 minutes before the show, the more the better. The earlier you can take control of the room, the more chance you've got of doing well in it when you get there. That's my answer.
Okay. So what we've got written down for next, and I think I remember a little bit about it, it has a legitimacy prover. And I believe that's where you were saying something about doing your second best trick of the show at this point, or something like that, originally.
Yeah.
I'll let you tell me.
As far as the legitimacy prover, I think I want to grab the audience's attention and I want them to know that it's going to be good. But then I think it's also, once you've got that instant attention, the time when you're most likely to have the most of the audience's attention, presumably, is at the very beginning. Because if lots of different things happen, like low music and introductions, and then the lights come on and a person walks out, people respond to texture. It's texture that holds an audience's attention, not tricks. The audience don't know the difference between a vanishing birdcage and an Azra illusion. They don't care. But what they do understand intrinsically is texture. And that's why when we watch movies and things like that, a bright scene is usually followed by a dark scene. A loud scene is followed by a quiet scene. A slow bit is followed by a fast bit. The same is true when you expand it out to TV series, episodes. There's texture within them. Audiences respond to texture over content in some ways. Content is important, but texture is important too. So that point, that first trick, that reel, when you've said hello and you've grabbed their attention, you say, well, here's what I've got to show you. I think that's the moment in the show when you're most likely to have everyone's attention because you've got them from texture and you haven't had the chance to lose them yet by not being very good, which is always a concern I wrestle with. So in that moment, the trick that I always want to do is something that proves to the audience that I know what a magic show is supposed to look like, and also something really, really good. And in the past, I used to do Chop Cup because I know that trick inside out. From back when I first met you, I was doing that trick and I was doing it in restaurants, 3 nights a week, 10 times a night. But now I've changed my show and I do cups and balls, which kind of is the same, and it still includes my chop cup because I do a cups and balls routine that is 3 cups, and then this is magicians mainly, right? We're talking technique and stuff. It's not, yeah. So there's 3 cups, and then I load one in that phase, and then there's 2 cups, and I load one at the end of that phase, and then I'm left with the final cup, and guess what? I basically do my chop cup routine. So all that's happened really is I've expanded that, but the idea is still the same. And the great thing about doing Chop Cup or Cups and Balls for me, and people can find their own trick, is that it's fast paced. It's got loads of magic in it, especially Cups and Balls. It's literally talked about as being the magical scale, the musician scales of magic. I don't say any of that stuff, but it's got vanishes, it's got transpositions, it's got reproductions, it's got loads, it's got every single element that a magic trick could basically have in it, penetrations, everything, but they're all in one trick. So if you're going to find a trick that proves to your audience you know how to do magic, Cups and Balls is a pretty safe bet because they get to see loads of really nice moments. When you do a flip stick vanish and the one comes back, or you take the ball and you do the Vernon Mora 1 spin and it vanishes really cleanly, or you produce a lemon or an orange or whatever those things are from under the cups. I think the audience know that they're in the presence of someone who knows how to do magic. So it's a legitimacy prover. I think if you've got the audience's attention, the next thing that you can do is prove to them that you deserve to hold on to it, that you deserve more of their attention. Because ultimately, all we ever are in entertainment is a reason for people to sell things, right? If you make a brilliant movie, essentially you're there to sell stuff that's on screen. If you make a brilliant TV show, you're only there for the ad breaks. If you make a brilliant YouTube channel, you make your money because the ads from the people who haven't paid subscription come in, and the people who have paid subscription, you get a portion of their money. You're basically there to sell something, and the same is true in live entertainment. If you are in a venue, you're there to sell drinks, basically, or you're there to sell food at the restaurant. So you're not always the most important part of someone's night. It's hard to deal with, as a egotistical thing. But if you're doing magic in a dinner venue, the dinner venue cares much more that people buy a dessert and a starter as well as a main course than they do about how good your show is.
Hmm.
But if your show is great, then that's important too. But you're maybe not the biggest part. For some people, the dinner is important and the magic show is secondary. So if you're going to grab people's attention, you have to prove to them that you deserve more of it. So legitimacy prover, 100%. I wouldn't say that it has to be your best trick or your second best trick or how it rates in terms of the rest of your show, but it does have to prove to the audience that you're good at magic or you're good at the thing you're about to do, because you're asking them to invest at this point in another 40 minutes of their time. So you have to show them that it's going to be worth it. Yeah.
Cool. Okay, that's good. There's lots of good information in that one. Another thing that I should be listening to, and you lot should be listening to out there, is that comment about the texture, because that's where my cabaret show falls down. It's all just in your face, go, fast, funny, and there's no pacing changes, no volume changes, nothing like that.
I'm writing a book about that at the moment. That's going to be a huge part of what my book is going to be about. And I've been working on this thing for ages, but I've got this idea for a chart where, you can choose to do something quietly, medium volume, or loud. And then you can choose to do something slow, medium, or fast. And then you can choose to stand in the middle of the stage or the side or in the audience. And then you can choose to have a spotlight or full lights. And then you can choose to use music, not use music, just music that highlights moments. I've got all of these different options, and essentially I have them in a chart. And what you will do with this chart is you will take the first trick in your show and you will cross off things that you use to do that trick. And then for the next trick in your show, you can only use 50% of those same options again. So it effectively forces you to inject texture in your show. Because I'm certain that most people, they stand in the middle, they talk at regular volume, they talk at regular pace, they don't use music, they just have full lights on, they talk at exactly the same time as the whole trick is happening. You could have a long intro, then a silent trick, or you could have straight into the magic and then talk and highlight. But there's loads of different options that you can sprinkle through your show to create texture. So that's what I'm working on at the moment. So, if that's the thing you're struggling with, anyone out there, do look out for this book when it finally is finished in 400 years.
I'll get it finished this year. I can get you back on and interview it and review it.
Oh, that'd be good.
Before we move on to the next one, just a little life confession here. I've also been doing Chop Cup since pretty much I've known you, largely because I'm pretty sure you accidentally sold me a £60 brass Chop Cup for the price of a £10 aluminium one. But don't worry, I'm sure Mark Mason doesn't watch the channel. It'll be fine.
I gave you an expensive cup for a cheap price.
I think you thought the price at the time was the price for the aluminium £10 one. I accepted that for ages, but then I've seen that Chop Cup that I use still to this day knocking around now, and it's more like a 60 quid Chop Cup.
That's good. I mean, chop cups have gone up a lot recently. I did a lecture tour earlier this year, and the Ickle Pickle wide mouth cup that I use, Darren Robinson, my friend who owns Warp Magic, was selling them. And when I bought it, I think it was 19.95 or something, and they're 65, 70 pound now. They haven't got any better. So I don't understand why such a big hike, but things are going up fast. Who knows?
Very
don't tell
brief
Mark, though, I'll still be in trouble now.
He won't watch this, don't worry. Not until I review something of his anyway. Yeah, just a brief sidetrack on the Chop Cup. But you always use the same one? Because I've tried constantly. It's always been my opener at tables. And I've tried to get rid of it, so I've got my hands free. I've tried to go smaller. I've used the chopped glass. I've used the little espresso cup that they put out for ages. I don't think that anything gets the reaction unless it's the full-size chopped cup with the fruit loads.
I mean, I don't do that anymore, but I do it as part of Cups and Balls, of course. But I never do just Chop Cup anymore. But that's only in the last 18 months that I've only been doing Cups and Balls. But I used to use the Morrissey cup, and I would have a lemon and a lime. Then I got the Ickle Pickle wide mouth cup that allowed you to use a lemon and an orange. It would fit a navel orange, which is big, and I stuck with that forever. I mean, I had the same Ickle Pickle cup for 12 years or so. I still have it now. If I did a close-up gig, I would certainly use that. But I always feel like when I see people doing Chop Cup with a mini cup and producing a pool ball and all that sort of stuff, I just think, what's the point? It's just as easy to load an orange into a chop cup if you do the trick right as it is to load a pool ball into a small one. So you might as well do the big one and have the biggest impact. I mean, I do it on stage where you're literally getting burned by the whole audience. If you can't get away with that at a table, that's crazy. You might as well use the biggest one, and it is of course going to be better. The audience are going to always going to react more to an elephant appearing than a motorbike. So yeah, produce an orange rather than a pool ball. It's way better.
And just for you lot, before we move on, if you can find it anywhere buried under some years of stock, you want to dig out Supercharged Classics Mark's DVD sets.
Don't do that.
It's good stuff on there, Mark. Your chop cup's great.
Well, I still do the same routine now. The routine I did on Supercharged Classics is still the chop cup routine I do now. I mean, that came out in 2009, but I taught that routine again on my Penguin Live lecture in 2020 as a stage routine. So don't root out Supercharged Classics, but do look at the 2020. Actually, I've got a Vanishing Ink masterclass coming out in July. And I teach the cups and balls that I currently do with chop cup as part of that as well. So wait for that if you're looking for a version of that.
Fair enough. You did a couple of Alakazam academies as well, didn't you?
I did 4 altogether. Peter basically kept me alive in lockdown. Gosh, I did 3 of them during lockdown, and I did 1 of them in real life down at Alakazam HQ. And they were all 3.5 hours each. So I put out, I think, 14 hours of material with Alakazam, which was just, it seems insane.
I have a part of the channel where I practice a trick just for the sake of practicing, even though I'm never going to use it, just to get the love of practicing back. It was going to be the billiard balls, but I can't do that because I've spent too much time already working on that, thanks to your routine, which I've been working on for a while.
You should learn Thurston's 5-card trick. It's really fun. It's basically, I don't know if I've got stuff here. Hang on, I'm rooting in a drawer. Basically, it's I didn't know I was going to Ninja Rings. I didn't know I was going to do anything practical here. So the first thing to say is that you need Bs for this because they're borderless cards, of course. Cards with borders on are no good for card manipulation. But essentially what happens in Thurston's 5-card trick is you do your typical back palm, but then you get to the point where you've done 5, except I'm going to take 4 here. I'm just going to do this as a cheat. But you get to the point where you've done 4, and as you put this last one in position, you do this transfer so that you can show this hand empty, and then you do the last one. I don't really have the space for this. And then that comes back. And then as you take that back, you place the other ones in position. And now you get a lovely... That's Thurston's 5-card trick. And it's great. It's a lovely little thing with only 5 cards. And Howard Thurston did it on stage. And if you're looking for something that's billiard ball-esque, but will fill that same spot, that's what you should practice. That's what you should do.
Yeah, annoyingly, I've now got to do that because I have to challenge myself, and I am back palm challenged. I've never been able to do it very well. So now that you've put that to me, I'm going to have to put it on the list. Thanks, Mark.
Great. It's a great trick. Honestly, I'm doing it in my show at the moment, and I'm using this kind of line, which I'm hesitant to say out loud because it's so new. Then someone else will go, "Oh, that's a good idea," and start doing it, and I won't have put it out anywhere. But I'm just talking about the fact that in a world where AI can basically make it look like anything has happened, as magicians, you're always searching for relevance in terms of what's the next thing I can do. And I found that actually the best way is to simplify things and go right back, the simplest props, just my hands, simple music, and then I do the Thurston 5-card trick. Honestly, people love it. It's great. But I mean, people always like card manipulation. It's always been popular in stage shows. But I think it's daunting for a lot of performers because you think you've got to learn to do double things and split fans and all of this stuff and, produce 500 cards, you turn your hands over like this. But that Thurston trick is 5 cards. That's it, nothing else. So take those 5 cards and you can get, a lovely, amazing moment. And the whole piece is a minute long, but not everything needs to be a 10-minute routine either. Some things can be, sprinkle them in between your longer routines because that's texture. There we go. Full circle.
Professional. Put it straight back on track. Let's drag you back on track with the list again. So we've done our attention getter and our legitimacy prover. In your more conscious list, you put down teach the audience how a thing works. Next.
Yeah, so I always in my show, typically the second or the third trick is something that in my show it's themed around YouTube. I have some gags about YouTube and about how magicians are giving secrets away on there, and I figured if you can't beat them, join them. So I do what would typically be described as a sucker trick, which is half-dyed silk, silk to egg, something like that. But essentially it's a trick that lifts the curtain a little bit on how a magic trick might work. Actually, when I do the Magic Castle or somewhere like that, I might do an 8 cards to pocket or something. So the audience are not necessarily, they're not actually learning how a trick works, of course, but they are learning and seeing in real life some techniques that magicians use. And I think it just elevates their appreciation for magic. But it's a really strong premise to an audience that they're about to learn a trick. And if you've just grabbed their attention and then you've proved to them that their attention is worth it by being brilliant at magic, then you say, I'm going to show you a little bit of how this works. And then you do something else that's good. I don't think audiences are as interested as people think about, gambling, like here's how we cheat at cards and stuff. In a stage setting, that's hard to pull off. Maybe in a close-up show they would be, but in a stage setting, to suddenly just go into that is difficult. But I think that if you're going to show them a little bit of sleight of hand or tell them that what they're about to see is performed with sleight of hand, people still have an inbuilt fascination with that. So I think, yeah, something that you let the audience in on it a little bit. It's kind of it's humility as well, isn't it? Like, I don't get to be the only one that knows these secrets. You come in as well. Let me come closer. Let me show you this thing. I think there's something about that kind of lean in moment. So yeah, definitely third thing for me is pretty much always that. And it still is right now, actually. I think in the time when it was with Scott Wells, I was doing Half Dead Silk, and then more recently I've been doing Silk to Egg, and more recently I'm now doing something else as well. Actually, right now I've got this whole bit in my show about how magic works in the brain, and I have a video of a dancing brain on the stage, and I have some visual stuff and a thing with a fake hand and all sorts of different stuff. But it is still basically explaining to the audience how magic works, but it's how all magic works, and that magic exists in this part of your brain on the left side between the front and the top. There is a part of your brain called the left prefrontal dorsolateral cortex, and that is the part of your brain that deals with surprise and things like that. And this is the part of your brain that a magic trick happens in, and I explain that to the audience, and along with some funny visual bits. So yeah, I still do the same thing. It's funny to me hearing this list and finding out that I am doing exactly what I once said I would do. Weird.
Yeah, you've just absorbed it completely. Another slight tiny sidetrack, because it's one of my favourite lines. I'm just curious, in the Silk to Egg routine, is the magician's egg line yours, or did you get that from somewhere else?
The magician.
What a magician's egg line is. This is a magician's egg, which is not an egg laid by a magician. But
Oh yeah, which is not an egg laid by a magician. So that joke is a Lance Burton joke. But as far as I know, but the topper that goes with that joke, which is where I'll say, so this is a magician's egg, which is not an egg that was laid by a magician. To be honest, not a lot of things are. That's what I added to that. And but it's originally a Lance Burton joke. Although a funny story with that is that when I performed my show at Magi Fest, Lance Burton was in the front row, and I did Silk to Egg in front of him, which was a really daunting moment. And at the end, he came up to speak to me, and I was thrilled to meet him, of course. And I got a photograph with him, and I have this book that I take Polaroid photographs of magicians, and then I have them sign in the book, and I stick the Polaroid next to it. And he was doing that, and we were talking, and he asked me if I would mind if he did my Silk to Egg routine. He said, there's some great lines in there, and I really enjoyed it. Would you mind if I did the routine? And, could you send me a video? And I said, well, it's your routine. I just did the jokes. And he said, I knew I recognized some of it somewhere. So somewhere in the world, Lance Burton is doing our Silk to Egg routine now, which is fun.
Excellent. Oh. What will you put next? Next, you put, get everybody in the audience involved. Is that still the case?
I literally do that now. Yeah, exactly that. I do that in two ways now, because the end of the Magic in the Brain thing has everyone doing the same thing. And then I segue into a trick, which loads of people, of course, are doing now, which is the calculator. Everyone gets their phone out and gets their calculators out and all that sort of stuff. But in my version, I have everyone in the audience also turn on the flashlight on their phone, and they join in using that in some way. And I've started to see that creep into the acts of a couple of incredibly well-known performers who I know have seen me do the show, but I'm not libeling anyone. But let's just say that some famous TV magicians who are performing shows around the world have started doing that too, but they got it from me. But I get everyone to put their torch on their phone and join in with that trick as well, and everyone joins in, and it's really a fun moment because It's just funny to me. This makes so much sense, and I know it's my idea, but hearing you say it to me, I'm thinking, oh yeah, that's good. Get the audience's attention, prove to them that you're good at magic, explain to them a little bit about how magic works, get them all to join in. Yeah, it makes sense. But that is exactly what I do right now. And I think if you can find a good trick, that is a group dynamic trick. And people have always done, the twisting arm thing, or something else that involves getting everyone to join in. Maybe it's bouncing a balloon around the room and people joining in and choosing things. Maybe it's a tossed out deck. Maybe it's something where even if everybody isn't joining in, maybe everyone feels that there is about to be an opportunity for them to join in, and that will achieve the same thing as well. If you don't want to do a trick where literally every audience member joins in, as long as you create a moment in which everyone thinks they could be called upon to join in, I think that achieves the same thing. But there are loads of things that do that. You could do, I mean, I've done, even recently, I've been doing the grey elephants in Denmark trick, and weirdly, it's like nobody's ever heard of it. But of course, if you didn't have the Lady Book Bird of Magic, or that, Nick Einhorn book that came out in 1998, you probably haven't heard of it. And because they're so ubiquitous, and because we know them, and because we know them from when we were growing up, or first getting into magic, you think, oh, everybody knows this. Literally nobody ever knows it. When I would do grey elephants in Denmark, I'd be surprised how many team members on cruise ships or other places would come up and go, oh, that elephant trick was amazing. And you just think, well, it's only simple maths, but I've presented it in an interesting way, and I have a few little things in it that I do, and I use visuals as part of it and all of that stuff. But again, it's everyone getting their phone out and using their calculator to do a thing, and it's not the calculated date prediction trick. So I've even done that recently, and I've found it's gone really well. Anything where you can get everyone to join in is good.
I remember seeing you do another show. I think you were doing a different thing with the phone, where you had to put in the necessary toxic force onto a borrowed phone.
Jelly
And you did
bean
it.
prediction.
Yeah, and you just did it in the most ingenious, obvious, logical way. That one of those moments where you go, "Oh, I can't believe I didn't think that." You have to turn the phone sideways to make it a scientific calculator. So you mentioned, let's take a look at the text or something, and then take a photo of
Yeah.
the audience, and it made so
Yeah, I
much sense.
always, when you're setting up that trick, I get a lot of emails about this actually, because it's in the Chicago show. When you're setting up that trick, at some point you have to turn the phone sideways on to access the scientific stuff that's there. You don't do that anymore. Now you access it by a button in the corner. You turn on the scientific thing. But yeah, I always thought, well, the only reason you would ever turn the phone sideways is to take a photograph. So I would always say, okay, we're going to do a mind reading trick across the whole audience. You guess what you think Susie or whoever Susie's text messages say, and I'll read them all out, and we'll find out if anybody was right. And then I would turn the phone sideways and say, wow, that's a photograph moment. If you could see your face. And in that moment, I would boom, 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 press the things I needed, turn the phone back. I was high and home and dry. But for anyone who's thinking about still doing toxic with the new iPhone update, actually, I can show this right now because I've got my phone in my hand. Nobody call me. So this is what it looks like now, of course, the calculator, that's the scientific version. But most of the time when you get it, it looks like this. It's on the basic version, and you access that by the bottom corner there. You can turn it to scientific or not. So say in my case, I was putting in 753 plus 0 times, and this is the point where you've got to get the bracket. So on their phone still, I would just turn on that, and I would open up the bracket, and then I would put it back to basic, and then this is the thing that you're stuck with on the screen. So the only difference you got to do now is when you're doing the trick, you just keep the phone to yourself for the first two selections. So the first person guesses, in my case, how many jelly beans are in the jar, 534 plus, and then the next person guesses 843 plus, and then the next person guesses 2 1, and as soon as I'm in that bit, it's moved everything off the screen. So only at this point I'll say, oh, by the way, I want you to see that I really am typing in, look, your guess 534 plus 843 plus 21. And I even comment on it and say, the great thing about the iPhone now is you can literally see everything that I typed in. So you know for sure that I'm typing in the numbers you said and not making them up myself. So 214, you said plus, and then I'll go, hey, you know what? You type them in, and I might hand them out and have them finish. And now, as we know, when you press equals, you of course get the thing you want. Then the problem is you have this tiny bit across here, which is a problem, but nobody on stage, nobody sees that. You just say, what's the final number? They read it out and you go, great. And now I go up into the little thing at the top here, you press the top bit and you get the history, and it takes 2 seconds to literally just delete that out, and it's gone. And then I give them their phone back. So for all the people who've emailed me, having watched the Chicago show, which is from 4 years ago, before this problem existed, and said, how do you do that trick now that the problem. They've got this problem. The truth is, I don't anymore because I'm doing something else. But a year ago, when that problem first started, I was still doing that. In fact, 6 months ago, and that's how I got around it. So now I'm going to tell people to watch this podcast to find the solution. Can you timestamp that somewhere?
I will. I will.
So I can just
Sounds like
say, here's how you fix that problem.
Sounds like an ingenious solution to the problem for you iPhone users. Obviously, I'm Android, so I never had the problem. But
Well, the thing is, because you're borrowing an audience member's phone, aren't you? So the reason that it's better, I think, to choose an iPhone is that they are all the same. Whereas if you choose an Android, if you get a Samsung or you get some other brand, it's just the Wild West. There's no way to know what it even is. Whereas if you get an iPhone, at least it's always going to be the same. Every iPhone is the same, but not even every Samsung is the same. Not even ever. I don't even know the names of any disgusting Android brands, but
in every way, borrowing a phone off the audience, you are factually correct. But I wouldn't be me if I didn't have an opportunity to take a dig at iPhone, didn't take it.
yeah. Well, there you go.
Let's get back to this list, get through it, and see what else we've got to say. The next thing on here was a palate cleanser.
Palate cleanser, yeah, that's something that typically, after we've had a moment where everybody's joined in, it will be something that's quite a bit more laid back because there's been a big moment, in any of those tricks where the audience have just found out that they correctly guessed how many jelly beans are in the jar, or that they have all guessed that it was going to be an elephant in Denmark, or that they've all picked the same pool ball on a screen, or that they've all got the date and time on their phone. Anything that's got that level of amazement and has happened to every single person in the audience at the same time is going to promote conversation. It's unavoidable. 100% that even if you're the greatest performer in the whole of human history, you will lose the audience's attention at that moment because they will want to talk to each other. They have to turn to the person next to them and say, can you believe that? Is that on your phone as well? Or is it just me? Did you think of that too? Or was it just me? They're going to talk. It's unavoidable. So I think what you have to do is choose a trick that does not require that you hold the audience's attention instantly. You give yourself some sort of buffer zone where you are setting up or doing something and the audience are allowed to settle back into the trick themselves. And for me, that thing is billiard balls. Because at this point, I want to remind the audience that it's a sleight of hand magic show and that's what I'm good at. And my billiard ball routine involves, and you can see it on YouTube. It's out there. In fact, it's unlisted at the moment, but I'm gonna make it public again tonight. So by the time anyone watches this video, it'll be there again. For me, I say this next piece is called When I Grow Up, I Want to Be a Magician. And it takes place on a rainy night in my bedroom when I was 8 years old. And then all the lights go down and thunder cracks and the sound of rain comes in heavy. And then I walk back out and I do billiard balls, as you know, to just the sound of rain, but in a spotlight. But it's a spotlight that I have. It's a P7 Lensa torch, which a lot of people use for hand shadows acts. And I was inspired for the theatrics of it by a hand shadows act. I'm good friends with Paul DeBeck, who does hand shadows. In fact, he did his hand shadow routine at my wedding. I love Raymond Crowe, who does hand shadows. There's a few brilliant people out there. Drew Colby is amazing. There's some great hand shadows acts out there. And I've been learning that myself, but I really like the theatrics of it. So the sound of rain, a single spotlight in just literally a torch, a handheld flashlight in a mic stand creates the spotlight. And I do billiard balls in that. But because of the break of me saying that and then the thunder crash and the rain, and I go off stage in the dark and I put the stuff in my pockets that I need to achieve the routine, and then I walk back out with a flashlight in my hand, shining it around the audience and looking around, and it's got this kind of theatrical movie-esque, theater stage show vibe to it that slowly draws the audience back in and calms them down again. And I think you need something where the audience are not required to join in, they're not really required to react, and a routine like that where you're effectively in the dark apart from a spotlight and performing to this heavy sound of rain, the audience don't really react to it. Sometimes they'll clap and I'm surprised when they do, but not always. But I also don't mind. I really like this thing I heard Luke Jemay say years ago, where he says that the best reaction to a magic trick is silence. And it's not really helpful to the performer for your ego. But if the audience are really engrossed in something or amazed by something, they won't do anything. They'll just stare, mouths agape. And he had this brilliant phrase, which was, applause sometimes means I recognize the successful conclusion of your theatrically pre-planned novelty. And that really made me laugh, and it's stuck deep in my head. And it's true. So sometimes in the show, it's nice to have a bit that lets the audience off with the need to fulfill what you want. You know, some of a show is a conversation, and some of it is the audience pleasing you, and some of it is you pleasing them. But in this moment, it's nice to just cleanse the palate and let them off, recharge their ability to react by not forcing them to. And so for me, that's billiard balls. But if you can find something, Thurston 5-card trick would be a good example, something that's like a manipulation trick, or something that's just purely visual, something where you don't talk to the audience at all, really, a silent trick, something that just lets them watch. That's what I would be searching for in this moment. Again, if you're aiming for texture too. Yeah.
What were you doing for that way back? Do you remember?
I think I was doing billiard balls then as well. I just have made it better now. I changed there's a subtle piano track underneath the rain as well. And I got better at doing billiard balls, and I bought a better, stronger torch, and I added some slightly different elements to it. And also now I finish with, I worked out that when you're doing the billiard balls, the final vanish, I don't know if I can show you this. I've got him right in. Look at that. That's my, I mean, this is my real working stuff that I've got down here that I've pulled out on a shelf, the ball trick. And I keep them inside of here. That's the quality of my labeling and what I need. But there's this final vanish that I do in the billiard balls that looks like this. And that's the one. But what I noticed is you don't need the thumb in it. You can do it just as well. Like this, yeah? So when I'm doing the thing that's common in billiard balls, it's not easy on these angles, but you know this move where the ball kind of looks like it travels slowly down your foot? When I'm doing that move, I realize that this hand is free. And I've also just gone off stage, and I take my jacket off as well, and I roll my sleeves up. And then I come back on with the torch, all very, very quickly, though, within about 15 seconds. And so my waistcoat, there's a pocket, of course. There's two pockets on the front of a waistcoat. So I put a snowstorm in one of them, because I realized that the audience only think of a snowstorm as being a snowstorm because we cage it as that. You know, we say, when I was a kid, I didn't see it snow and all of that sort of stuff. So the audience think of it as a snowstorm. But actually, it's just confetti, right? If you don't tell them it's a snowstorm, they don't think of it as being a snowstorm. So I have a snowstorm, quote unquote, in my pocket. And then while I'm doing this move and I'm standing this way under the audience, this hand is stealing a snowstorm from my waistcoat pocket. And I do that move. Then I come back this way and I do this. And then I have a top hat, which I've brought out with me as I'm shining the torch, because part of the routine is talking about what I used to imagine a magician looked like. And the torch represents a torch that I would borrow from my dad's toolkit and pretend I was on stage. And, you know, I used to have this top hat and all of this stuff. And I put the top hat down. And so in the top hat is a fan. And so the very last thing I do is I do this vanish, and then with this ball I drop that as I pick up the fan, and now I fan what they believe is the final ball becomes confetti. And in the spotlight that is on stage, that confetti looks like rain, and so it perfectly finishes the routine in a nice theatrical way. So that's what I'm doing now, but I wasn't doing that before. I've added all of that stuff in more recently, and I like to change material in the show a lot if I can, but sometimes evolution is as good as revolution. So if I can take a routine and I can add a significant change to it that I think really alters how the audience will perceive it or the reaction to it, that for me is as good as a new thing. So I'm still doing billiard balls because I just love it so much, and I love manipulation magic.
It's a great routine to watch. Even the version without all that I've seen on, I think, Alakazam, just the basic routine is just really, really nice. I've been learning it.
Thank
You'll
you.
be pleased to know I've come up with my own presentational idea for it.
Well, the moves are still Roy Benson's routine. You know, Roy Benson taught to Alan Wakeling, and Alan Wakeling did everywhere. And there's nothing really changed about the routine since Benson did it. Obviously, originally when Bouchier Decoulter invented it, everyone used to do the billiard balls in front of their body, and it was quite different. You know, the old billiard balls used to be a thing where the performer would produce a billiard ball like this and then come up and take it, and there would be, you know, this move where you do this thing where it's like the constant reproduction of billiard balls, but he would do that sort of in front of his body, and all the moves happened here. And it was Roy Benson who took it and turned it into this thing where instead it would be up here and the display would be up to the side and the moves would happen like that. So none of that really existed before Benson, but not one bit of it really has changed since Benson. I mean, there are amazing performers out there doing incredibly unique billiard ball routines, but for me, that original simple routine is great, and I still do it. So you've stolen that routine from Roy Benson rather than me.
Fair enough. We've got 2 left, and then we can get off this pattern and ask a couple of more questions.
Okay.
Right, next down, you wrote down pathos.
Pathos, yeah. So something that dramatically alters the texture. Obviously, in that instance, billiard balls is pathos too. Palette cleanser, pathos, they're both the same thing effectively. But I like something that's a bit of storytelling. So in my show right now, I'm doing this sideshow routine where I tell this whole story about the history of the sideshow. And then I have all this stuff in it that's to do with sideshow performers. I do fire eating and balloon swallowing and all these different things that are like, in some ways it's cod sideshow, but I also do blockhead and I do needle swallowing and I do all these things, but I've compacted them into a 12-minute routine. But there's a lot of storytelling in it with music underneath, and in my version of it with the screens on cruise ships and all of that stuff, as I'm talking about Jojo the dog-faced boy and Annie Jones the bearded lady and Myrtle Corbin the four-legged girl, and all of these people, original photographs in black and white are appearing of them on screen, and so the audience can see them as I talk about them. So pathos, it really represents storytelling to me. Again, another element, another bit of texture, something different, but also with loads of magic peppered throughout it. And so I tell their stories and I show their tricks and I do different stuff that they do. And that's where I've moved the fire eating to. The fire eating for me now is part of the sideshow routine, because in my old fire eating routine, I used to eat a single torch, eat the other single torch. Then I would light one of them and pass the flame across with my fingers. And then I would light one of them and I would do a tongue transfer, set my tongue on fire and light the other torch with that. And then I would eat 2 torches at the same time. In the sideshow version of it now, I do a lot of that stuff, but I don't do the tongue transfer anymore, because I just realized that I'd been eating fire for maybe 6, 7, 8 years. I don't really remember. But the tongue transfer involves an inevitable amount of swallowing some fuel. You have to take a soaking wet torch and a lit torch, and you press the soaking wet torch against your tongue, and you leave behind some fuel. And the fuel that is left on your tongue is then lit on fire, and then that flame lights the second torch. But it's inevitable when you're doing that, that some of that fuel will go down your throat. You just can't help it. And I do sometimes, I do at least 4 or 5 shows a week. My schedule for touring around and doing holiday parks and cruise ships and everything is always at least 4 or 5 shows a week. But sometimes if I was doing a dinner theater venue, I might do 2, 3, 4. House of Cards, Nashville. Sometimes you do 6 shows in a single night, 6 shows in a night. And I started thinking, I'm swallowing a lot of lighter fuel. It can't be good for me. And approaching 40, I started to think, that needs to stop. And I decided that the reaction that I was getting from lighting my tongue on fire was not as important to me as not swallowing about 1 liter of fuel a month. So I took that bit out. But I still do eat fire. I just repackaged it in a way where I didn't have to do that bit anymore. So that sounds
like the kind of move that people wouldn't appreciate the level of anyway. So one of those moves that it doesn't quite get the reaction for what you're actually doing.
Oh yeah, if you put the 2 flames underneath your crotch, I say, here's a quick impression, Jerry Lee Lewis, and I put the flames under my crotch, and I say, goodness gracious, and it gets a big laugh, and I say, cancel those roasted nuts at the bar and all that. It gets a way bigger reaction than setting my tongue on fire. For someone who's a purist and knows about it, setting your tongue on fire is amazing, but for the general audience, it's just not worth your health sometimes. So I took that out, and I'll be honest, I haven't missed it, but I am glad that I'm not swallowing fuel anymore. I started to get a weird feeling. Michael Jordan, who eats fire a lot as well, he and I talked about it, and he had something that, like, I think he was getting like blistered lips or something. Doing stuff like that is clearly not good for you, eating fire and all of that. So you have to you have to judge your level of risk against how important it is to your act. And I'm still happy to eat fire, but I don't want to swallow fuel anymore. So that's a change. But thankfully, that bit fits way better in the sideshow routine. And it really is a bit that I'm enjoying doing. But as far as pathos goes, I think what I'm really saying is that's your opportunity to tell a story. And actually, the more shows you do, the more opportunity you get, the better you get at performing or whatever it might be. When you're a close-up magician, you're doing 8 minutes at a group, right? 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 8 minutes maximum. When you're a stage performer, you're doing 20 minutes, 30 minutes, 45 minutes. When you're a stage performer with a lot of experience, you start getting asked to do more and more and more. Sometimes you're doing full theatre shows by yourself, 45 minutes for the same audience. And in a close-up environment, it's basically impossible to tell an 8-minute story with no magic in it at all, because that's your whole time. But if you're doing an hour and a half for an audience, not only is there room to tell an 8-minute story with no magic in it at all, it's almost a requirement, because you can wear the audience out, just by trick, reaction, applause, amazement. You can really wear them out. It's too much of a good thing. So sometimes telling a story for 5-10 minutes with no magic at all that you've really learned and you can say every night like it's the first time you said it with passion and vigor becomes essential. So for me, when I'm now doing 2 45-minute shows for the same audience on cruise ships, having stuff like that has become more and more important. So find something you really, really care about, whether it's the sideshow, whether it's the circus, whether it is gambling, cheats in Las Vegas, whether it's the life of Houdini, whether it's a famous psychic that you've heard an interesting story about, something that leads neatly into a routine, or whether it's the thing about horse race gambling where you get 5,000 people and you get a fifth of them to bet on horse 1, and a fifth of them to bet on horse 2, and a fifth of them to bet on horse 3, and 4 and 5. And then all the people who win are just the people who bet on horse 1. But now you split them up again and you get them to bet on 1, 2. And eventually by the end, you have one person that has been told every time. I think Darren Brown did a special about this, but eventually you have one person who's been given tip after tip after tip that leads them to believe that you're a genius. And then at the end, they find out that they've put a bet on, but it could go either way. Something like that. Anything that you found interesting that you've heard about, if you can tell the story of it in an engaging way and then spin that into a trick that you do for the audience that bounces off the back of that story, this is the moment in the show when I would do that, because we're all relaxed, we've all got to know each other, they've seen multiple different angles, and now it's time to, okay, let me tell you a story. That's a good time for that. Yeah, pathos. So pathos should actually say storytelling.
The last one on your original list was best trick in the show. That's still how you end it?
Yeah, well, I tend at the minute to be closing with multiplying bottles, which I love, and partly because I was doing cups and balls, and I figured if I'm going to carry a table around that I can do cups and balls on, I might as well do multiplying bottles on it as well. So some of it is logistic. If you're going to have a big, busking style table or something, you might as well use it twice. So I started doing multiplying bottles. I've fallen in love with that trick. Audiences love it. I mean, the time when people associated with Tommy Cooper is long gone. When you think about it from a realistic point of view, which people exist in this world that have heard of Tommy Cooper? You're now talking about British people who are, and by the way, for us, I'm 39. For me, of course, who's like a magic history and comedy nut, I've heard of Tommy Cooper, but I bet many other people who are, younger than 40 haven't. So I think you're talking to really have heard of Tommy Cooper and have seen him. You're talking about British people who are 55, 60 and above. It's such a small demographic of the world, and it's such a small demographic of the people that are likely to be in your audience, that you can do a trick like multiplying bottles that we all grew up thinking, oh, Tommy Cooper. And nobody will ever reference that to you ever. And I promise they don't. So for me, it's multiplying bottles. Although I have to be honest, sometimes if I look at the audience and I think I'm about to die a death, like on New Year's Day that we talked about at the beginning, the multiplying bottles sometimes gets moved to third because I go out and I do my opener, I grab their attention, and then I do my prove I'm legitimate trick. And if it's still not going that well, I'll get the multiplying bottles in right away because I know that that trick just crushes. That's like my, when you get asked the question, if you could only do one trick again for the rest of your life, I wouldn't choose multiplying bottles. I would choose something that I enjoy physically performing more, like cups and balls, with more places in it to go with sleight of hand. But if I had to choose one trick that I could perform for the rest of my life that I know is going to crush in front of any audience, no matter what, that would be it. I've done a corporate gig once. The entire audience were Japanese, didn't speak a word of English, and I didn't know that until I got there. So I get there in front of the audience. By the way, the audience are Japanese. They don't speak English. Okay. Why did you book me? Well, it's magic. It's visual, isn't it? This is going to be rough. Multiplying bottles, killed. Everything else, I struggled. So it's that trick that no matter who the audience are, I know it's going to go well. So it's not necessarily, again, best trick, because that's incredibly subjective. I have people that come up to me after the show on cruise ships, especially because they're American and they're a bit, their hearts are a lot closer than their brains than they are in England. We're very cynical, aren't we, British people? But Americans are a bit more open to being emotionally affected by a performance than British people are. And I'll get Americans come up to me and say, when you're doing that thing, that ball trick, that they cried, because there's something about the rain and the claustrophobia of it and all of those things that affects them emotionally. And the idea of me being a kid and practicing in my room or whatever, for some reason they find it emotional and they find that to be their favorite trick. For some people it's the cups and balls. For some people it's learning a little bit about magic. For some reason it's the Thurston 5-card trick and them seeing some real sleight of hand. But so the best trick is very subjective, but in terms of trick that I know is never going to let me down, because there's nothing worse than finishing your show on the audience going, "Oh, that was all right," but it wasn't as good as the 3 tricks before that. You just need a trick that's absolutely 100% going to crush. And actually, I'm looking at my set here on my phone, which is my current show, and multiplying bottles is last on that too. So, yeah, it never lets me down. And also, I've taught that routine. I think I taught it on one of those Alakazam academies as well, actually, but it's got a bit better since then. But it's also going to be on my upcoming Vanishing Ink masterclass. So if you want to see all of these routines, basically that we've talked about, they're going to be on that. But yeah, multiplying bottles never lets you down. 100% killer every single time. So don't look for your best trick then, but do look for your trick that never fails then. Yeah, and also don't finish with anyone on stage except you. You don't want to volunteer on stage at the end of the show.
That's a good point. Yeah, I like that. So that broke down pretty much everything you said before on the other interview, and we've seen that it kind of matches up with what you're doing now. You've just sort of internalized things. In a minute, I'm going to ask you, what was that? Yeah.
Well, when I was a kid, my dad always used to say, people who tell lies need to have really good memories. And I asked him what it meant. And he said, well, if you always tell the truth, you never have to remember what you said. And I think that I feel happy that what I said before for the purpose of a lecture and on another podcast has been borne out in the show that I'm doing now to be exactly what I really think. I never have said anything in a lecture or on a product or whatever that isn't what I was really doing. So I've never had to remember anything, which is good. But also, I do feel like you should be free to change your mind if you learn something. And so there is that as well as a bit of evolution in what we've just talked about since I talked about it with Scott in 2020. So it's good. I'm pleased. I hope my dad's proud.
Towards the end of the interview, I'm going to give you an opportunity to just give me any kind of random bits of advice that you think for people would use for a show. But I've got a couple of specific questions first.
Okay.
I listened to you on another podcast recently, recommendation for people out there. I've just discovered it. I think it's got Podcast at the Card Table, new podcast that's come out. I've absolutely no idea who's running it. It just says Corey. I don't know who he is, but it's
Corey Taylor. He's a friend, my friend Tom Bolton, who worked at Magic Box, and I play Call of Duty with fairly often. It's one of his best friends, and they work together on Tom's very successful show at Edinburgh. And I met him running the Great North Run, and then he just called me up and said, "Do you want to do my new podcast?" And same as when you message me, I always just say yeah, because I did a podcast myself. I know how hard it can be to get guests sometimes. So what you really want is someone to say yes, and then give you all of their availability, and then when you chase them up on it, say, "I'll be there." That's what I did with you. That's what I did with Corey. But his podcast is brand new. But it was very in depth about show structure and talking about favorite books and stuff like that. So if after this you want to hear 2 more hours of me talking, that might be worth listening to. Podcast at the Card Table. It's on YouTube as well.
It is worth listening to. It's a good podcast. But one bit of it that I particularly hooked onto, and I'd like to give you an opportunity to re-rant about, is comedy, because you have a very specific comedy style. I have
Yeah.
a very different, snarky, sarcastic, bastard love child of Graham Jolly and Amazing Jonathan style on stage.
Yeah.
But you have certain thoughts about people who aren't being funny, who aren't funny necessarily, being comedy magicians. And I thought I'd let you
Well,
get that
I
go.
mean, I just call myself magician, and
Mm,
if ever I get to a venue and they've put comedy magician on the poster, I don't like it, even though I'm funny, and I think I'm funny in real life. I'm funny. The thing I said to Corey is that if you go to a shop and you don't make the person behind the counter laugh when you're just buying bread, you're not a funny person. People who are funny make other people laugh around them all day without trying. It's just built into who you are. And I know that that happens with me. When I go to the shop and I buy bread, I make the person laugh. Somehow it comes out of me. But I still don't like being called comedy magician because it's a heavy moniker to live up to. And magic is so good that it doesn't need comedy. So one of the frequent questions you get asked if you are a funny performer and your show is funny is, how do magicians who are not necessarily funny inject comedy into their show? And my answer is always, don't. Why?
mm,
Why would you want to do that? It's like saying, how would you get a stage magician who isn't an acrobat to inject acrobatics into their show? You don't. If you haven't been funny your whole life, or you haven't been a gymnast your whole life, don't put comedy in your show in the same way as you wouldn't put acrobatics in your show, because magic is so good. I think Teller said this.
mm,
It doesn't need comedy to survive in the
mm,
same ways it doesn't need acrobatics to survive. Magic is amazing. And a lot of the best magic shows I've ever seen, the performer didn't try to be funny a single time. And if anything, all you do if you're not really funny and you try to be funny is you make the show worse. So not being a funny person and trying to do
mm,
comedy has the potential to do 100% more damage than the 10% good. Getting one or two laughs in your show is fine, but it might destroy what the audience think of you. And Mark Kermode talks about this very succinctly in one of his books about movies, where he says people will really enjoy a scary movie that isn't that scary, or a thriller that isn't that thrilling, or a romance that isn't that romantic. But nothing bombs at the box office worse than a comedy film that isn't funny. So if you're not funny,
mm.
don't bother. It's not for you, but you don't
Yeah,
need
I've
to
seen it
be.
done. It's painful to watch.
Really
Just don't do
painful.
it.
Yeah.
You can't learn to be funny. It's just a natural thing.
You
And
really can't learn
like
to
you
be
say,
funny.
it's pointless. I mean, I can't imagine, for example, Mark Oberon kicking out a 10-minute stand-up set in the middle of his act.
Yeah.
It's not him. And
But
what he does is great.
all those people who you know that are the best, funniest stand-up magicians in the country, or in the world, people like Graham Jolly, Amazing Jonathan, Nick DeFat, Derek Hughes, John Archer, Matt King, all of those people are funny in real life, and they're not just suddenly funny on stage. David Williamson. He's funny in real life. They're all funny in real life. I can't think of anybody really who is dry as a bone, unfunny, boring to be around in real life, and gets on stage and is absolutely hilarious.
I'm going to go to a sort of general question, general advice section at the end, but there's one question I want to know, which is in no way useful for the goals and in no way practical. And it's just because I want to know, what's it like performing at the Magic Castle?
Oh, it's amazing. I mean, it's amazing. Um, it's like it's everything you think it's going to be. It's sort of scary, exciting, fulfilling, um, daunting. It's such a gamut of things because you spend the whole time in Magic, if you know about the Magic Castle, thinking, wow, that would be a great place to perform. And then you go and perform there, and it is a great place to perform. And you constantly find out all of these things happen there that wouldn't happen anywhere else. I'm standing outside of the parlor at the Magic Castle once and waiting to do the show. And what typically happens is you open the door to the parlor and the audience start to filter in. And then you can either stay in the backstage room or you can wander around the upstairs bar and corridor where the queuing system is. So I typically go out there and I see people filter into the room so that I can speak to the room manager or the whoever's hosting the getting drinks and stuff and know how long it's going to be until we start the show. So I'm standing in that area and the place is decorated incredibly. It's amazing. and there's wood panel, walls everywhere, and this carpet that's very specific to the Magic Castle, in the same way as the carpet in The Shining is specific to the Overlook Hotel. And then there's all these posters of famous magicians up, and all of this just ephemera to do with magic. And then above the door of the Magic Castle, I'm standing there, and I see this box, and I say to the room host, "What's in that box up there?" And he says, "Oh, it's Di Vernon's ashes." And you go, "Really?" And he goes, "100%, that's Di Vernon's ashes." And then that same day, I meet someone in the queue, and they're saying, they just saw my show that's on the way out, and they talk to me. They're telling me that they really loved my show, and they could see some of my inspirations. And in my cups and ball, in my chop cup routine I was doing at the time, I had this banner that dropped down. I wonder if it's here somewhere. Is it handy? It'll be somewhere. I had this banner that dropped down that said "World Famous Cup and Ball Trick," and it was completely stolen aesthetically from Carl Ballantyne. Carl Ballantyne used to run out and drop this banner, and it said "World Famous Magician," and magician was spelled wrong, Carl Ballantyne. And Carl Ballantyne's been dead for a number of years, so I didn't think he would mind, but I love the aesthetic of it, and so I was trying to nod to my hero there, and I did that with the World Famous Cup and Ball Trick. And someone speaking to me afterwards, and she says, "I really loved your show, and I could see some of the influences, and do you know Carl Ballantyne?" And I say, "Yeah, of course, one of my favorite magicians ever." And then she says, "Well, he was one of mine too, but then he was my father." And I'm like, "Oh my God." So then I'm talking to Carl Ballantyne's daughter. And then another time at the Magic Castle, Dick Van Dyke, it's his birthday, and he's in the room for my show. And someone tells me, Dick Van Dyke's in the front row of your show. And I think, oh my God, that's terrifying. And I walk out, and what they haven't mentioned is that Pee Wee Herman is sitting right next to him. So then I'm performing for for Dick Van Dyke and Pee Wee Herman at the same time. Then another time, I walk out, and David Williamson, who we mentioned earlier, is in the second row of my show. And then there's all the people that you meet. You meet amazing people that are performing there. Arthur Trace, who's an amazing manipulator, I always enjoyed. He was performing in the Palace, and he was in the dressing room next to mine. Or Rich Marotta, whose act I always loved, that did the What Your Future Holds with the red nose thing, but also this amazing Fishbowl production. He's in the dressing room next to mine one week, so I get to meet him. And then the Magic Castle Library is amazing, and you go in there, and they just have this unbelievable collection of books that you can't even believe anyone owns, let alone, that you can go and look at them and read them, and that's great. And so between the venue, which is really the star, and the food being amazing, and the audiences being amazing, and all of the other magicians that you get to meet being amazing, and then you walk out and you perform, and because the audience are in this heightened perception of magic state, where they're so determined to have a great time and see great magic, that they really look on everything you do without any sometimes there's a bit of an irony or adult audiences are a bit like, "Oh, a magician," and then you're good, and they like it, but there's always a bit of a cynicism inside of them of like, they're surprised that they liked it. So you're always climbing over that barrier. Whereas at the Magic Castle, because it's a magic specific venue that's not easy to get in, there is no barrier, there is no cynicism. They want to see great magic, and when you show them average magic, they perceive it as being the greatest magic in the world. So when you show them great magic, their heads fall off. I mean, it's just, you can tell how excited I am to even talk about it. And I wear the hoodie right now, and it's honestly just the most amazing place in the whole world. And if you get to perform there, it will live in you forever. It changes who you are. There's almost a thing that happens where people who've been there, my friend Elliot Bibby always wanted to perform there, and I helped him get linked up a little bit. He sent me his video, and I passed it on for him, and eventually performed there. And we always used to joke about how often I would say, when I was at the castle, you find yourself doing it all the time. And then he came home, and after a couple of weeks, he called me up and he said, "Do you know how many times I've said when I was at the Magic Castle this week?" And it's so special that when it happens to you, it just lives inside of you, and it changes who you are in some way. It makes you love magic more. It makes you a bit better at magic. It makes you better at magic in the eyes of people who know you've been there. It just changes what you feel is possible to do and say in front of an audience forever. It makes you more daring, because every time you're thinking about your show, instead of thinking now, Oh, people are going to think I'm a bit of a dick if I say this esoteric thing about, psychology or whatever in a, working men's club in Birmingham. Instead of that, you're thinking the audience at the Magic Castle will really like this because they like everything. So it literally changes your perception of what an audience would be willing to listen to hearing a magician say or watching a magician do. And then you
Mm.
do that stuff and say it in the real world for those audiences that you used to perceive as cynical, but you say it in a way with a full chest that's daring, like you believe in it. And because you say it that way, they believe in it too. And it becomes this self fulfilling prophecy. So I really can't overstate it. There's something that happens at the Magic Castle that changes you as a person, and it never goes away. And I wish that everybody got the opportunity to do it, but I'm also glad that they don't.
Well, it's not on this year's goals list, but it is in the 3-year plan, so it's
Don't
going to
give
have to
up,
happen
man.
eventually.
Don't give up.
Mm. So you've been talking for I can't remember when we started, but it's Mark James. So we'll assume we've been talking for about 4 to 5 hours already.
Possibly.
There's only so much editing my computer can do before it explodes. So we'll wrap this up with just an open question. We've gone through the structure as it was. Now, just sort of any general advice for the people out there that are watching this channel for advice on stage shows, construction, uh, anything to do with stage shows, really.
Well, when you first told me you were going to ask that question, my instinct was, oh, I hate that question. And everybody does. Every
Mm.
interviewer asks a question like this, and every interviewee, and I've been on both sides of that fence, hates that question. Any general advice that you can think of, it's
Hmm.
such a minefield of a question. And so my initial reaction was, oh, I don't want to answer that because I don't have any because it's so hard. But as I was looking at the monitor, I noticed something that's inspired my answer, and it's true of my life. Surround yourself with the things that inspire you the most. If you look at the wall behind me, you look at this room. I'll pan the camera a little bit so you can see as well. But we're all sort of a chicken breast waiting to be marinated in some way. A chicken breast that is marinated in garlic and chili or whatever tastes better than one that is just cooked. The greatest chef in the world can cook a chicken in a dry pan, and it will be juicy and it will be tender and it will be all the things a chicken breast is supposed to be, but it will not taste as good as one that has been marinated in chili and garlic and anything else. Marinating yourself in some sort of flavor has an effect on you that is perceived by an audience, and it's there when you try to come up with material, and it just makes you better. So what I would say is, don't let the things that you love just live inside of your own head and in the bookmarks of your phone or on the favorites or the reading list of your computer or in a notebook that only you see. You have to really live it. You have to surround yourself by it, and you have to have people in your life, whether it's your wife or husband or whoever you live with, who's happy for that to be the case as well. So our entire house is filled with stuff from gigs. I know I'm wearing this Magic Castle hoodie here right now, but the walls of the stairs of my house are filled with posters from pantomimes I've been in, and they're filled with. There's a frame on the stairs which has my first ever contract from the Magic Castle. There's a frame that's got a letter in it, a thank you card signed by Rob Zabrecki, who was the head of the board of directors, I think, at the time, thanking me for having performed there. There are pictures from performing at the Chicago Magic Lounge. There's pictures from performing at the House of Cards in Nashville. The stuff that I've done, that's the things I'm most proud of in my life, they're up the stairs of our house. But they're not just mine. Pictures my son drew at school, they are there too. Awards that my wife has won at work, her dance certificates from when she was a little kid, they're all over our stairs. Every day when we come up and down the stairs of our house, we walk past the memories of the best things that ever happened to us. But in the spaces that you've got that you're meant to be creative in, this room I'm sitting in right now is like my studio space where I practice and where I've come out to record. But if you look at the wall here, I'm going to tilt the camera a bit so you can see, you'll see that there are literally posters and things all over the wall that are things that I love. You know, Thurston and Keller and Cervez Leroy and Tarbell and Newman, and my absolute favorite, which is Carter, is there. Little tip if you're going to do this on the wall behind you for filming, and none of these posters have got glass in them. They're all just the plain, they're the frames, but none of them have got glass in them because they're too reflective. And actually, look at that. See this case? This is a case I use on stage, but every single one of the stickers on this case is a place I really did my show. Helsinki, Edinburgh, Stockholm, Iceland, Turkey, Hollywood, Paris, Nashville, Chicago, Ohio for Penguin Live. Every single one of those stickers is a place that I genuinely have done my show in real life. And all of those things on the wall are people that I love and performers that have inspired me. And the same is true in the house too. My house is full of, you know, in the kitchen, we have huge bookshelves full of the books. And I always buy clothing from venues I work at. So I've got this Magic Castle hoodie, but I've got t-shirts from it. And I've also got t-shirts from House of Cards Nashville and Chicago Magic Lounge. And I've got t-shirts and stuff from not Five Guys, from In-N-Out Burger and stuff that, so I'm surround myself of memories of places I've been that I loved and people that I love, and wear clothing of places that I've loved, and surround myself with posters of people that inspire me, and fill my show with nods to stuff of the history of this business. And actually, I'm covered in tattoos, which nobody would probably know, but because on stage you can't see them, but literally my entire arms, legs, chest, everything, I'm fully covered in tattoos. And on my legs, as well as having loads of different stuff that's to do with my family, I have these ghosts. I get these ghosts tattooed, and they are I've got one of my wife, and I've got one of my son, and I've got one of my dog, and I've got one of me. And they're like ghosts versions of us. But I also have a little ghost of my friend Taylor, and I've got a ghost of my friend Stephen Williams. And like my best friends in the world that I speak to every single day, I have them tattooed on me. And the thing that I guess I'm trying to get at as my tip is that if you love something so much that you're willing to share it with the world, then surround yourself with it in every possible way. You know, I love movies so much that watching them is not enough for me. I have to have them tattooed on me. You know, I need to carry them around all the time. Everything on this arm, these are all different Back to the Future tattoos right here. And, you know, I love Big, and so that's a Zoltar machine, and E.T. is there. And I love these things so much that just watching them is not enough. I need to have them on me. And I love my friends so much that speaking to them on the phone or catching up with them in real is not enough. I need to have them on me. I love these performers, Carter the Great, Keller, Thurston, so much that reading about them every now and again is not enough. I need to see their posters every time I'm in this creative space, this place that I come to practice. So my tip for stage shows or any type of magic endeavor is just love it so much that doing it, reading about it is not enough. You're obsessed. You need to find more ways to get deeper and further inside of it so that it becomes you. So marinate yourself. That's my tip. Sink yourself into the marinade of the things that you love. I'm looking at you right now, and that wall behind you, man, it's not busy enough. Get more stuff on there. Pack it out.
It's all in the office.
Okay.
If you see the channel, all the review sections and the performance section, the intros, they're in there. Although I wish I'd done this interview before then, so I knew not to put glass in front of the posters. Getting the lights in the right place to film in there is a nightmare.
Yeah, all of these are literally that's just the plain poster there. There's no glass in them at all. I realized as soon as I set this room up that it was literally just like 15 reflections. So I just took all of the perspex out of the frames, and on camera you can't tell at all, except for the fact that they don't reflect. So, but as a glasses wearer, maybe that was a bit more instinctive to me than someone who doesn't wear glasses.
No, I wear glasses, but it's not on camera. Wear them these days. Yeah, this room's a little bit bare. Just put those up. A drinks deck, Star Trek, Superman, the basics.
I love Star Trek. Star Trek is the new Star Trek's one of my favorite films, the 3 that have been out. And I'm so annoyed that they haven't brought out the next one because of the contractual thing between Chris Pine and thing. It's like, we want the next one.
I've got to be honest, when I said I would interview, I was really pretty sure this wouldn't come up in conversation, and I was quite glad because they're in horrendous disagreement on this point. But I'll let you have your taste.
You don't like them?
No.
Oh, I love them so much. When that movie starts and I hear that When that music kicks in, it's like makes me so excited. I love In Beyond, where it starts out and they're running through that jungle thing, and all those guys that are painted are chasing after them, and then it's just such a great start to a movie when the thing comes
Beyond was
about
the
the
best of
water.
the three.
But it's like so good. They're so epic, and I think that Chris Pine is amazing in it, and I love the rest of the cast. I just think they're great. I like the originals too, though. What's your favorite original Star Trek movie?
Uh, Probably six, if I'm honest.
Which one's that?
Undiscovered Country. It's where they've got a little bit of budget behind them. A decent
Oh,
story.
I like the Voyage Home, the one that's in San Francisco.
Also great.
Yeah,
I miss
that's
your
the
movie
thing with the
podcast.
whales. So
Yeah.
good.
I missed that movie podcast you used to do with Taylor. That was fun. I didn't stay for
I
very
think
long.
it's I think it's still out there on Spotify. What was it called again?
Oh, God knows.
Some it was all right though, wasn't it? Yeah, we did a lot of episodes about Stand By Me and The Shining and stuff like that. It was just getting so hard to sit and watch a whole movie and get as many facts as I did because we came from a point of view that I brought facts and Taylor brought, storytelling stuff to it. And yeah, it was quite good. I can't think what it was called, but it's still out there. Mark James and Taylor Hughes movie podcast. What was it? Was it called Real something? I can't remember.
If I find it, I'll put it in the comments.
Yeah, I used to like doing that. For a 10-minute episode, I watched every single Ryan Gosling movie in a month. And then I rated my top 5 Ryan Gosling movies, which I think Place Beyond the Pines was the one I picked as number 1, which is a great, great movie. But yeah, that's the other thing is as well, if you want a tip for creativity, just make stuff, make more things. What you're doing here is perfect because you're making a podcast. Like, make more things, even if they're not successful. Make stuff in every direction. Write poems, write stories, draw, paint, make a podcast, make videos, learn how to use Photoshop, edit. Make stuff in every direction, because if you want to be an artist, and what you're saying actually about your show is that you want it to be more theatrical and artistic, the only difference between an artist and everyone else is that they attempt to make art. That's it. The world decides whether you're an artist of any worth or not, but whether or not you act like an artist is entirely down to you. So all you can do is make things. That's the difference. And typically when you do find someone who's an actor or a painter or whatever, they often do loads of different stuff. You find that they write poems or play music or, draw and illustrate and stuff like that. So make stuff in every single direction. It's really good for you. And you never know what one thing is going to inspire the next thing, chain reaction. So surround yourself with things that you love and then make as many new things as you can. Marinate. Be a
Well,
chicken
chicken
breast.
breast waiting to be marinated sounds like a t-shirt to me. Well done.
Thanks. That was good. We did a good podcast then, I think. I will leave you on a salutation. Live long and prosper.
Cheers, Mark.
Thanks, buddy.
Hi, folks. That's about it for this week. Hope you enjoyed it. Hope you enjoyed and got lots of helpful information from Mark. Hope you enjoyed my waffling at the beginning and my practice. If you want to grab a copy of Designing Miracles and join in with the book review in 3 weeks, feel free to do so. You can get it in print, or I think you can get it in audiobook from Vanishing Ink. If you want a friendly, helpful, non-toxic magic Facebook group to join, go ahead and join Magicians Level Up. Please share, like and subscribe to the video, and above all, give me some comments down below. Let me know that you're watching this. I love seeing the comments coming in, responding to you guys, answering questions, whatever you want to put down there. That's about it for this week. Thanks very much. See you again.